Let's discuss electricity. You believe you comprehend what it is, don't you? I mean, you employ it constantly. Right now, electrons are flowing through the device you're browsing this on. Electricity is powering the illumination around you, keeping your food chilled, charging your devices. It's everywhere. So you must grasp it, right? Okay? Clarify it to me. What occurs when you plug something in? Where does the power actually originate from? What is electricity at its core? Most individuals state something vague. It's energy. It's electrons advancing. It's current in a wire. But here's what disturbs me about those responses. They don't actually clarify anything. They just rename the mystery. Sure, electrons are advancing, but why? What's pressing them? And why does that pressing create illumination or warmth or motion? The reality is darker than you believe. The thing we call electricity is deeply, profoundly bizarre. And the way we teach it completely conceals that bizarreness. We make it sound normal, predictable, safe. But once you observe what's really occurring, once you peek behind the curtain, you realize that we're manipulating something absolutely extraordinary. Something that breaks everything you believe you know about how the world operates. Let me demonstrate you what I mean. Here's an experiment. Simple one. Take a piece of plastic covering. Rip off a strip. Now rub it between your palms really fast like you're trying to warm them up now. Hold it near the back of your palm without contacting. Sense that the hairs on your arm are advancing, standing up, reaching toward the plastic. You can actually sense the plastic tugging on you from a distance. Stop and consider about that for a second. You rub plastic. That's it. No batteries, no wires, no power source. Just friction. And now that plastic can reach across vacant air and tug on your body. How? In your normal experience of the world, things only press or pull when they're contacting. You press a seat, you contact it. You lift a book, you contact it. Forces require contact. Except here's a piece of plastic not contacting you, tugging on your arm hairs through vacant space. Most individuals shrug. Static electricity. We learned about that in middle school. It's not important. Not important. You're examining at the force that holds every particle in your body together. The force that makes chemistry possible. The force that allows your neurons to fire, your muscles to contract, your vision to function. You're examining at one of the four fundamental forces of the cosmos, demonstrating its ability to act across distance. And you believe it's a trivial trick. This is the issue. We've become so familiar with electricity that we've forgotten how absolutely insane it is. Let's break down what just occurred. When you rub that plastic, you scrape the electrons off your palms and pile them onto the plastic. Just a few trillion extra electrons. And here's the thing that's going to break your mind. Those excess electrons despise each other. They press away from each other with a force so massive you literally cannot comprehend it. Let me try anyway. Take two electrons, place them 1 centimeter apart. The electromagnetic force between them is about 10 to the 42nd power times stronger than the gravitational force between them. 10 to the 42. That's 1 followed by 42 zeros. The electromagnetic force is so incomprehensibly stronger than gravity that gravity might as well not exist. For electrons, gravity is irrelevant, meaningless. Electromagnetic forces are everything. So here's the inquiry. If these forces are that monstrously strong, why isn't everything exploding? Why doesn't matter just tear itself apart? The response is almost magical. Cancellation. Consider about what a particle actually is. At the center, you've got protons with positive charge. Around that, you've got electrons with negative charge. Positive and negative, plus and minus. And these charges follow one simple rule. Like repels like, opposites attract. The forces are exactly equal in magnitude. The pressure of repulsion equals the pull of attraction. So in normal matter you acquire an intimate mixture of positive and negative charges. Protons and electrons packed as close together as physics allows. Every positive charge is surrounded by negatives. Every negative is surrounded by positives, and they balance out. The enormous repulsive forces are canceled by equally enormous attractive forces. Everything is neutral. The forces are still there. Those monstrous electromagnetic forces are still acting, but they're balanced so precisely that the net effect is zero. And because the forces are so huge, even the tiniest imbalance creates effects you can sense. When you rub that plastic covering, you advance maybe 1 electron in every trillion. That's essentially nothing, but it's enough to make your arm hairs stand up. Because when the underlying forces are that enormous, even the smallest excess creates a noticeable effect. This changes everything about how you consider about matter. Pick up a mug, hold it in your palm. What are you sensing? You believe you're sensing the solidity of ceramic physical substance. Incorrect. You're sensing electromagnetic repulsion. The electrons in your palm are pressing away from the electrons in the mug with enormous force. The reason you can't press your palm through the mug is because the electromagnetic forces are so strong that the electrons refuse to overlap. Your palm never contacts the mug. Not really. There's always a tiny gap between the particles in your palm and the particles in the mug. You're not sensing contact. You're sensing the electromagnetic force pressing back at you. And here's the thing that should completely restructure your worldview. All forces you've ever sensed are electromagnetic. Every pressure, every pull, every sensation of contact or pressure or resistance, it's all electromagnetic repulsion and attraction acting at a distance. You have never contacted anything in your entire existence. Every time you believe you're contacting something, you're sensing electrons, pressing away from electrons through vacant space. The same force you observed with the plastic covering, just acting at smaller distances where the forces become enormous. Now let's discuss about wires. You've got a copper wire stretching across your residence. At one end, there's an outlet. At the other end, there's a lamp. You flip the switch. The lamp illuminates up instantly. What just occurred? The standard clarification is that electricity flows like liquid. Electrons enter the wire at one end, travel down its length, and emerge at the other end. That clarification is completely incorrect. Electrons in a wire advance incredibly slowly, about 1 millimeter per second. At that velocity, it would take nearly half an hour for an electron to travel across your residence. But the lamp turns on instantly. So, what's really occurring? Here's the key. The wire is already full of electrons. Copper has lots of free electrons just sitting there, ready to advance. When you close the switch, you create a voltage difference. That voltage presses on the electrons at one end of the wire. But because electrons repel each other across distances, that pressure immediately affects the next electron, which presses the next one, which presses the next one. It's like a line of individuals standing shoulder to shoulder. If you press the individual at one end, the individual at the other end senses it almost immediately, not because the first individual walked down the line, but because the pressure was transmitted through the crowd. The pressure travels through the wire at nearly the velocity of radiation, not because individual electrons are advancing fast, but because the electromagnetic force acts instantaneously across distance. That's what makes electricity useful. You can press here and something responds there almost instantly across huge distances. But where does the pressure originate from? Let's trace it back. Your lamp connects to an outlet. The outlet connects to wires in your walls. Those connect to power lines, and those connect to a power facility. Maybe it's miles away, maybe 100 miles away. And at that power facility, something is rotating. A massive turbine weighing tons, rotating at thousands of rotations per minute. And that rotating motion occurring miles away is what's powering your lamp. How is that possible? The connection between that rotating turbine and your lamp is magnetism. Electricity and magnetism are the same thing. They're not two separate phenomena. They're two aspects of one unified force, the electromagnetic force. Advancing electric charges create magnetic fields. Changing magnetic fields create electric currents. They're inseparable. Here's how a generator functions. You rotate copper wire inside a magnetic field. The magnetic field presses on the electrons in the copper. The electrons don't want to advance, but the field is insistent. You force the electrons to flow. That's electric current. That's it. Motion plus magnets plus copper equals electricity. Now run it backwards. Press electricity through copper wire inside a magnetic field. The field presses on the advancing electrons. The wire advances. That's a motor. Same phenomenon, just reversed. Generators transform motion into electricity. Motors transform electricity into motion. And the reason this functions is because electricity and magnetism are unified. They're aspects of the same underlying force. This should seem impossible. You're conveying me I can advance metal in one place, another metal advances in another place with nothing physically connecting them except thin copper wire? Yes. You're conveying me that rotating a magnet near copper generates a pressure that travels through wires and makes other copper advance? Yes. And we employ this every second of every day. Every motor, every generator, every power grid on our planet operates on this principle. Liquid falls on one side of a dam. Turbines rotate. Copper advances through magnetic fields. Electrons acquire pressed. The pressure travels through hundreds of miles of wire at nearly radiation velocity. It reaches your residence, makes electrons advance through a motor. Your fan turns on. Liquid falling in one place makes a motor rotate in another place, miles away, connected by nothing but thin metal wire. That's insane. You don't even need permanent magnets for this to function. Take a coil of copper wire. Run electricity through it. The advancing electrons create a magnetic field. Now advance that coil near another coil of copper. The changing magnetic field presses on electrons in the second coil. Current flows even though there's no physical connection. That's a transformer. That's how the power grid functions. Just copper, just motion. That's all you need. Metal communicating to metal across vacant space using electromagnetic fields. Now, here's the thing that should completely change how you observe reality. I stated earlier that all the forces you sense are electromagnetic. All they are pressing and tugging. All are contacting and pressing. But consider about what that means. The normal forces, the mechanical forces you experience every day, those aren't fundamental. Those are consequences of the electromagnetic force. The electromagnetic force is the fundamental reality. Everything else is derived from it. When you press on a door, you're creating electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your palm and electrons in the door. When you walk on the floor, you're being held up by electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your feet and electrons in the floor. When radiation hits your vision, you're detecting oscillating electromagnetic fields causing electrons in your retina to advance. It's all electromagnetic. Chemistry. Electromagnetic forces between electrons and different particles. Warmth particles vibrating because electromagnetic forces hold them in place. Biology. That's chemistry, which is electromagnetic. Your entire sensory experience of reality is electromagnetic interactions. And here's the deepest thing. You can't clarify the electromagnetic force in terms of anything simpler. You can't state it's like a spring or it's like a rope, because springs and ropes are made of electromagnetic forces. The electromagnetic force is fundamental. It's one of the four basic forces of nature. You have to accept it as a brute fact about reality, and then everything else acquires clarified in terms of it. That's uncomfortable because the electromagnetic force acts at a distance, and that violates your intuitions. You've evolved to grasp contact forces. But contact is an illusion. There is no contact. There's only electromagnetic forces acting across tiny distances. To grasp electricity, to really grasp it, you have to rebuild your intuition from the ground up. You have to accept that the cosmos is made of fields that permeate all of space, that charged particles press and pull on each other across those fields, that action at a distance is the rule, not the exception. When you flip illumination switch, here's the real narrative. You close a circuit. Electrons throughout the entire circuit start advancing slowly about a millimeter per second. At the power facility, a turbine rotates. Magnets rotate near copper coils. The changing magnetic field presses electrons. Those electrons press on the next electrons. The pressure propagates at nearly radiation velocity through hundreds of miles of wire. The pressure reaches your residence. Electrons flow through the thin filament. The filament resists. It's hard for electrons to squeeze through. That resistance generates warmth. The filament acquires hot enough to glow white. Electromagnetic waves radiate out. Some of those waves hit your vision. The oscillating electromagnetic fields cause electrons in your retina to advance. Those advancing electrons trigger chemical reactions. Signals travel through your neurons to your mind and you observe illumination. Every step is electromagnetic. The turbine rotating is electromagnetic forces. The signal traveling is electromagnetic repulsion. The resistance is electromagnetic forces. The illumination is electromagnetic waves. Your vision is electromagnetic. Consider about how extraordinary this is. 200 years ago, none of this existed. Then we discovered these forces. We figured out how to manipulate them. We constructed machines that could generate electricity, transmit it across vast distances, and employ it to do useful work. And in doing so, we completely transformed human civilization. Electricity provided us instant communication, telegraph, telephone, radio, television, internet, all electromagnetic. It provided us artificial illumination, cities that never sleep. It provided us motors, machines that can do work without human or animal muscle. It provided us computation, billions of tiny switches manipulating electromagnetic forces to process information. Every single aspect of modern existence runs on electricity. And it's all based on this one insight that there's a fundamental force that acts across distances. And if you learn to manipulate that force, you can do things that would seem like magic to anyone from 2 centuries ago. So what is electricity really? Electricity isn't a thing. It's not a substance or a fluid. Electricity is what we call it when we manipulate the electromagnetic force to do useful work. But more fundamentally, electricity is proof that the world is not what it seems. The world seems mechanical, firm objects, pressing against each other through direct contact. But that's an illusion. The real world is made of fields and forces acting at a distance, particles pressing and tugging on each other through vacant space. When you observe plastic attract material, you're observing the fundamental force that makes chemistry possible. When you turn on illumination, you're commanding electromagnetic fields that permeate all of space. When you grasp that, when you really grasp what's occurring, everything changes. You realize the world is electric, that forces act at a distance, that firm matter is just a carefully balanced dance of repulsion and attraction, and you realize that humans figured this out. We discovered these forces. We learned to manipulate them. We constructed a civilization on top of them. That's one of the greatest triumphs of human intelligence. So, next time you flip a switch, remember you're not just turning on illumination. You're manipulating fundamental forces. You're making electrons press each other across entire cities. You're converting motion to electromagnetic fields and back to motion. You're wielding power over nature itself. And that's what electricity really is. Not a utility, not a convenience. A window into the fundamental nature of reality and proof that humans can grasp and manipulate that reality. That's the real narrative of electricity. Not comfort, not familiarity. Truth,